Hello and welcome back. I'm Jeffrey with the Roanoke City Public Libraries, and we've been reading Coraline. Today we're going to actually finish with chapter 13. Coraline's parents never seemed to remember anything about their time in the snow globe. At least, they never said anything about it, and Coraline never mentioned it to them. Sometimes she wondered whether they had ever noticed that they had lost 2 days in the real world, and came to the eventual conclusion that they had not. Then again, there are some people who keep track of every day and every hour, and there are people who don't, and Coraline's parents were solidly in the second camp. Coraline had placed the marbles beneath her pillow before she went to sleep that first night home in her own room once more. She went back to bed after she saw the other mother's hand, although there was not much time left for sleeping, and she rested her head back on that pillow. Something scrunched gently as she did. She sat up and lifted the pillow. The fragments of the glass marbles that she saw looked like the remains of eggshells one finds beneath trees in springtime, like empty, broken robin's eggs, or even more delicate, wren's eggs, perhaps. Whatever had been inside the glass spheres had gone. Coraline thought of the 3 children waving goodbye to her in the moonlight, waving before they crossed that silver stream. She gathered up the eggshell-thin fragments with care and placed them in a small blue box, which had once held a bracelet that her grandmother had given her when she was a little girl. The bracelet was long lost, but the box remained. Miss Spink and Miss Forcible came back from visiting Miss Spink's niece, and Coraline went down to their flat for tea. It was a Monday. On Wednesday, Coraline would go back to school. A whole new school year would begin. Miss Forcible insisted on reading Coraline's tea leaves. "Well, looks like everything's mostly shipshape in Bristol fashion, lovey," said Miss Forcible. "Sorry," said Coraline. "Everything's coming up roses," said Miss Forcible. "Well, everything. I'm not sure what that is." She pointed to a clump of tea leaves sticking to the side of the cup. Miss Spink tutted and reached for the cup. "Honestly, Marian, give it over here. Let me see." She blinked through her thick spectacles. "Oh dear, no, I have no idea what that signifies. It looks almost like a hand." Coraline looked. The clump of leaves did look a little like a hand, reaching for something. Hamish the Scotty dog was hiding under Miss Forcible's chair and wouldn't come out. "I think he was in some sort of fight," said Miss Spink. "He has a deep gash in his side, poor dear. We'll take him to the vet this afternoon. I wish I wouldn't know what could have done it." Something, Coraline knew, would have to be done. That final week of the holiday, the weather was magnificent, as if the summer itself were trying to make up for the miserable weather they had been having by giving them some bright and glorious days before it ended. The crazy old man upstairs called down to Coraline when he saw her coming out of Miss Spink and Miss Forcible's flat. "Hey, hi, you, Caroline!" he shouted over the railing. "It's Coraline," she said. "How are the mice?" "Something has frightened them," said the old man, scratching his mustache. "I think maybe there's a weasel in the house. Something is about. I heard it in the night. In my country, we would have put down a trap for it. Maybe put down a little meat or hamburger, and when the creature comes out to feast, then bam! It would be caught and not bother us anymore. The mice are so scared they won't even pick up their little musical instruments." "I don't think it wants meat," said Coraline. She put her hand up and touched the black key that hung about her neck. Then she went inside. She bathed herself and kept the key around her neck the whole time she was in the bath. She never took it off anymore. Something scratched at her bedroom window after she went to bed. Coraline was almost asleep, but she slipped out of her bed and pulled open the curtains. A white hand with crimson fingernails leapt from the window ledge onto a drain pipe and was immediately out of sight. There were deep gouges in the glass on the other side of the window. Coraline slept uneasily that night, waking from time to time to plot and plan and ponder, then falling back into sleep, never quite certain where her pondering ended and the dream began. One ear always open for the sound of something scratching at her window pane or her bedroom door. In the morning, Coraline said to her mother, I'm going to have a picnic with my dolls today. Can I borrow a sheet, an old one you don't need any longer, as a tablecloth?" "I don't think we have one of those," said her mother. She opened the kitchen drawer that held napkins and the tablecloths, and she prodded about in it. "Hold on, will this do?" It was a folded up, disposable paper tablecloth covered with red flowers, left over from some picnic they had had on several years before. "That's perfect," said Coraline. "I didn't think you played with your dolls anymore," said Mrs. Jones. "I don't," admitted Coraline. "They're protective coloration." "Well, be back in time for lunch," said her mother. "Have a good time." Coraline filled a cardboard box with dolls and with several plastic dolls' teacups. She filled a jug of water. Then she went outside. She walked down to the road just as if she was going to shop. Before she reached the supermarket, she cut across a fence into some wasteland and along an old drive, then crawled under a hedge. She had to go under the hedge in 2 journeys in order not to spill the water from the jug. It was a long, roundabout looping journey, but at the end of it, Coraline was satisfied that she had not been followed. She came out behind the dilapidated old tennis court. She crossed over to it, to the meadow where the long grass swayed. She found the planks of the edge on the meadow. They were astonishingly heavy, almost too heavy for a girl to lift, even using all her strength, but she managed. She didn't have any choice. She pulled the planks out of the way, one by one, grunting and sweating with the effort, revealing a deep, round, brick-lined hole in the ground. It smelled of damp and dark. The bricks were greenish and slippery. She spread out the tablecloth and laid it carefully over the top of the well. She put a plastic doll's cup every foot or so at the edge of the well, and she weighed each cup down with water from the jug. She put a doll in the grass beside each cup, making it look as much like a doll's tea party as she could. Then she retraced her steps back under the hedge, along the dusty yellow drive, around the back of the shops, back to her house. She reached up and took the key from around her neck. She dangled it from the string as if the key were just something she liked to play with. Then she knocked on the door of Miss Spink and Miss Forcible's flat. Miss Spink opened the door. "Hello, dear," she said. "I don't want to come in," said Coraline. "I just wanted to find out how Hamish was doing." Miss Spink sighed. "The vet says that Hamish is a brave little soldier," she said. "Luckily, the cut doesn't seem to be infected. We cannot imagine what could have done it. The vet says some animal, he thinks, and he has no idea what. Mr. Bobo says he thinks it might have been a weasel." "Mr. Bobo?" "The man in the top flat, Mr. Bobo. Fine old circus family, I believe. Romanian or Slovenian or Leviathan or one of those countries. Bless me, I can never remember them anymore." It had never occurred to Coraline that the crazy old man upstairs actually had a name. She realized. If she'd known his name was Mr. Bobo, she would have said it every chance she got. How often do you get to say a name like Mr. Bobo out loud? "Oh," said Coraline to Miss Spink. "Mr. Bobo, right. Well," she said a little louder, "I'm going to go and play with my dolls now, over by the tennis court, round the back." "That's nice, dear," said Miss Spink. Then she added, confidentially, "Make sure you keep an eye out for that old well. Mr. Lovett, who was here before your time, said he thought I might go down for half a mile or more." Coraline hoped that the hand had not heard this last, and she changed the subject. "This key," said Coraline loudly. "Oh, it's just some old key from our house. It's part of my game. That's why I'm carrying it around with me on this piece of string. Well, goodbye now." "What an extraordinary child," said Miss Spink to herself as she closed the door. Coraline ambled across the meadow toward the old tennis court, dangling and swinging the black key on the piece of string as she walked. Several times she thought she saw something the color of bone in the undergrowth. It was keeping pace with her, about 30 feet away. She tried to whistle, but nothing happened, so she sang out loud instead, a song her father had made up for her when she was a little baby, and which had always made her laugh. It went, "Oh, my twitchy wishy girl, I think you are so nice. I'll give you bowls of porridge and I'll give you bowls of ice cream. I'll give you lots of kisses and give you lots of hugs. But I'll never give you sandwiches with bugs inside." That was what she sang as she sauntered through the woods, and her voice hardly trembled at all. The dolls' tea party was where she had left it. She was relieved that it was not a windy day, for everything was still in its place, every water-filled plastic cup weighed down the paper tablecloth as it was meant to. She breathed a sigh of relief. Now was the hardest part. "Hello, doll," she said brightly. "It's tea time." She walked close to the paper tablecloth. "I brought the lucky key," she told the dolls, "to make sure we have a good picnic." And then, as carefully as she could, she leaned over and gently pasted the key on the tablecloth. She was still holding on to the string. She held her breath, hoping the cups of water at the edges of the well would weigh the cloth down, letting it take the weight of the key without collapsing into the well. The key sat in the middle of the paper picnic cloth. Coraline let go of the string and took a step back. Now it was all up to the hand. She turned to her dolls. "Who would like a piece of cherry cake?" she asked. "Jemima, Pinky, Primrose?" And she served each doll a slice of invisible cake on an invisible plate, chattering happily as she did so. From the corner of her eye, she saw something bone-white scamper from one tree trunk to another, closer, closer, and closer. She forced herself not to look at it. "Jemima," said Coraline, "what a bad girl you are. You've dropped your cake. Now I'll have to go over and get you a whole new slice." And she walked around the tea party until she was on the other side of it toward the hand. She pretended to clean up spilled cake and to go get Jemima another piece. And then, in a skittering, chittering rush, it came. The hand, running high on its fingertips, scrabbled through the tall grass and up onto a tree stump. It stood there for a moment, like a crab tasting the air, and then it made one triumphant, nail-clacking leap onto the center of the paper tablecloth. Time slowed for Coraline. The white fingers closed around the black key, and then the weight and the momentum of the hand sent the plastic doll cups flying, and the paper tablecloth, the key, and the other mother's right hand went tumbling down into the darkness of the well. Coraline counted slowly under her breath. She got up to 40 before she heard a muffled splash coming from a long way below. Someone had once told her that if you look up at the sky from the bottom of a mine shaft, even in the brightest daylight, you see a night sky and stars. Coraline wondered if the hand could see stars from where it was. She hauled the heavy planks back onto the well, covering it as carefully as she could. She didn't want anything to fall in, and she didn't want anything to ever get out. Then she put her dolls and the cups back in the cardboard box she had carried them out in. Something caught her eye while she was doing this, and she straightened up in time to see the black cat stalking towards her, tail held high and curling at the tip like a question mark. It was the first time she had seen the cat in several days, since they had returned together from Other Mother's place. The cat walked over to her and jumped up onto the planks that covered the well. Then slowly it winked one eye at her. It sprang down into the long black grass in front of her, and rolled over onto its back, wiggling about ecstatically. Coraline scratched and tickled the soft fur in its belly, and the cat purred contentedly. When it had enough, it rolled over onto its front once more and walked back towards the tennis court like a tiny patch of midnight in the midday sun. Coraline went back to the house. Mr. Bobo was waiting for her in the driveway. He clapped her on the shoulder. "The mice tell me that all is good," he said. "They say that you are a savior, Caroline." "It's Coraline, Mr. Bobo," said Coraline. "Not Caroline, Coraline." "Coraline," said Mr. Bobo, repeating her name to himself with wonderment and respect. "Very good, Coraline. The mice say I must tell you that as soon as they are ready to perform in public, you will come up and watch them as the first audience of all. They will play Tumpty Tumpty and Toodle Oodle, and they will dance and do 1,000 tricks. That is what they say. I would like that very much, said Coraline. When they're ready. She knocked at Miss Spink and Miss Forcible's door. Miss Spink let her in, and Coraline went into their parlor. She put her box of dolls down to the floor. Then she put her hand into her pocket and pulled out the stone with the hole in it. Here you go, she said. I don't need it anymore. I'm very grateful. I think it may have saved my life, and saved some other people's death. She gave them both tight hugs, although her arms barely stretched around Miss Spink, and Miss Forcible smelled like raw garlic she had been cutting. Then Coraline picked up her box of dolls and went out. What an extraordinary child, said Miss Spink. No one had hugged her like that since she had retired from the theater. That night, Coraline lay in bed, all bathed, teeth cleaned, with her eyes open, staring up at the ceiling. It was warm enough now that the hand was gone. She had opened her bedroom window wide. She had insisted to her father that the curtains not be entirely closed. Her new school clothes were laid out carefully on her chair for her to put on when she woke. Normally, on the night before the first day of term, Coraline was apprehensive and nervous. But she realized there was nothing left about school that could scare her anymore. She fancied she could hear sweet music on the night air. The kind of music that can only be played on the tiniest silver trombones and trumpets and bassoons, on piccolos and tubas so delicate and small that their keys could only be pressed by tiny pink fingers of white mice. Coraline imagined that she was back again in her dream, with the two girls and the boy under the oak tree in the meadow, and she smiled. As the first stars came out, Coraline finally allowed herself to drift into sleep, while the gentle upstairs music of the mouse circus spilled onto the warm evening air, telling the world that summer was almost done. The end. Thanks for reading Coraline with us. We hope to see you back at some of the other library's programs. Have a good one.